So we're going to start. We have a large group that's participating online. So for those of you who are here in person, I'm going to be trying to remember to look at the camera that is behind you guys. So if it looks like I'm looking up at the wall, I am, or the ceiling. But we're going to get started. But to begin with, one of the important things is that we're going to be using the handouts that I emailed to go through and actually create the plan for what you're going to do on ACT Administration Day. And so this time is going to be work time as well as learning about what other people have done that works well as we go. So that downloaded form that I emailed, you're going to need that. It's in a Word format, and it's meant to be edited as we go. So you'll want to download that. The other thing that you'll want to download are the test administration manuals. And there are 3, depending on if you're doing paper administration, you'll download the 2 paper ones. One is for accommodated testing, and the other is for the standard testing. If you are doing online administration, it's only 1 testing manual, and you'll want to download that because it has both the accommodation information and it has the standard administration information in it as well. And those are both on that same email with the handout from yesterday and this morning, if you got it this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me. So with those things, we will go ahead and get started. Does anybody here have any questions on handouts? Okay, online, are we good? Okay, then let's get started. So ACT Day is coming up, and for those of you doing online, it's more like ACT several weeks, which is a blessing and a curse. But we're going to go through some of the helpful hints, things that you need to be aware of as you're getting ready for that day so that you can make sure that things are in line, ready to go, and you don't have stress. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen. So by the end of today, there's 3 things that we want to have accomplished. We want to have identified whatever tasks need to be done, and we want to put those tasks in kind of a sequential order and ordered them by priority. And then we want to create your actual plan. How are you going to accomplish those tasks? When? When do those things need to be done before test administration day? There's 3 critical components to doing this well. So the first one, which you guys probably have already guessed, is going to be that these things need to be planned out. So we're going to do a lot with planning. The second one is preparation. This is identifying what kinds of things do you actually need to create. So looking at some of the materials, there'll be things that unless somebody has created it before you and handed it to you, you might need to create them. And then the third item is communication. And this one is huge because this is where the majority of your snags will show up, is in who do you need to communicate information with, who's going to do that communicating, when does it need to occur, and what messages need to be clearly communicated. So this might include parents, this will include teachers and staff members, it could even include busing, it could include your front office people. So there's a huge group that will work to identify who needs to have messages communicated with them and what do those messages need to be. So the question is, so why do we need to address this now? It's what, January 10th today? Sorry, the last week is all smushed together. And you know, this is the end of February. This is in March. Well, the answers, here's your top 3. I didn't do a top 10 because I'm not creative like David Letterman on this one, but I did top 3. So the first one, number 3, is that it requires time and effort. So these are things that are going to take more than an hour or 2 or 10. So they're going to take a while to get done. Third one, or second one, is that it can't be done the day before or even 2 days before testing. So a lot of the stuff, it's going to be divided into a month before, 1 to 2 weeks before, and then a day before and then day of. So you've got 4 different chunks of time where you're going to need to be making sure that things happen. And the number one reason is to avoid headaches by doing it right the first time. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar with this little clip. Okay, so that's what we want to avoid. And sometimes testing day can feel like that. And so if you haven't seen this short, it's called Lifted. It's a Pixar short. It's actually humorous, but we're not going to watch the rest of it. But when you're thinking about testing day, sometimes it can feel like that because there's so many moving parts, so many things that have to be happening all at the same time, and different people that need to be involved in different roles simultaneously. So it's kind of like that switchboard. As a matter of fact, when I was thinking about testing day, this clip came to my mind because of the switchboard, because that's kind of what it feels like, and especially if you're in a very large school that has a lot of students who are testing. Let's see if it's going to move now. Perfect. Okay, so talking about where to start. So our step one is we're going to check the ACT administration manuals. So in your workbook, you've got some instructions. So this is on the first page of the workbook. And there's a little table. And it has 4 sections. So these are tasks that need to be done a month ahead of time, 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time, 1 to 2 days ahead of time, and then on test day. And so as you type into that little table right there, it will expand. Or if you want to add table cells, if you're somebody that likes everything divided by rows, you can add rows if you'd like. But the task right now is to take a look at the administration manual, and we're going to go through and we're going to actually look at the table of contents only, because the administration manual is 144 pages, and so we're not going to go through all of that. But the table of contents for the administration manuals will give you a good idea of the kinds of tasks that need to be done. And so while we go through those things, by the way, step 2 and 3, these are what we're going to do next. And we'll organize, assign ownership, like that. So if you haven't already downloaded the menu, you can get it from Utah's ACT website under step 5, pull down menu 5, and then you'll find the testing administration manuals on there. So if you ever need more copies of them, you don't know where to find them, go to the ACT website under pull down menu 5, and you'll find them there. So what we're going to spend the next few minutes doing, actually 15, because there's a lot of things we want to identify, is going through the testing administration manuals. For those of you who are here in person, I'm going to have you work with each other to identify tasks. For those of you online, if you want to identify things and put them in the chat menu. If you are doing paper testing, again, you'll need those two, the standard and accommodated. And if you're doing online, then you just need this one. If you're doing all three modes, you'll need all three. So we're going to spend time looking at the table of contents and looking for tasks and trying to categorize them by a month, 1 to 2 weeks, 1 to 2 days, and day of test. And so we're going to spend about 15 minutes working on those. So we'll reconvene at about 1:27-ish. So go ahead and spend some time looking through that and start making your list. As you're looking at your table of contents online, things I would look for are the big ideas. What kinds of information do you need to have in the 1 month, the 1 to 2 weeks? But look at, for example, if you're doing paper testing, under the category of, from the table of contents, test facility requirements. So this will give you some ideas. You're going to need to have rooms. You're going to have rooms that have enough room for people to walk around and proctor. So how are you going to plan those things? Those are going to be items to include in your checklist. So as you go through here, just look for things that you can put down in your list that are related to items in your testing manual. And we'll check back again in about 7 minutes. Okay, so the question online is, can somebody show us how to verify proctor caching, and what was the rest of it? And if your system is approved for online. Okay, so the proctor caching part needs to happen by Friday, and the verified, sorry, I still have influenza brain, I think. The first part of the question again, can somebody verify? Oh, explain how to verify. Okay. Got it. Okay, so explain how to verify proctor caching. So when you're done with proctor caching, you should get the same green bar that you got when you managed your participation. So when you went through and you said, we're going to do paper testing and we want our materials delivered on January 29th. By the time you were done with that menu, you got a green bar at the top of your screen. You should see the same green bar when you're done with your proctor caching and it has all downloaded successfully. If you have questions on that, the ACT help desk is the place to go. And that's the 1-800-553-6244, extension 2800. State code 45. I've spent a lot of time on the phone with them in the last little while. But they can go through and they can look at your school specifically or your district specifically. And they can pull up that information and look and say, did the stuff go through or not? Same with, are we verified for the online testing? If you're doing online, they'll be able to look that up. They don't send us a report at the state, unfortunately. And so I actually don't even know which of you guys are doing paper and which of you are doing online unless I call and ask them to tell me that information. Or I get our state ACT rep to send me all of that information. So the best thing to do to verify, if you want to be double checked and triple checked, make sure, is to call the ACT help desk and then say, hey, I've downloaded my proctor caching. I did my mock administration. If you're doing it online, you have to have a successful mock administration. And then that is done. Check and make sure that we're good for online testing. Yep, this Friday is the big day. So there's, I think, 6 different things that need to be completed by Friday. So you've got proctor caching. A lot of them have to do with online testing. If you're doing online, so you need to have your proctor cache ready to go. You need to have all of your technical requirements ready to go. You need to have the mock administration complete, and it needs to have been successful. for everybody, not just online, you need to have verified your student enrollment numbers. If you need to enroll or unenroll students, you can do that using the enroll and unenroll form, which you can find if you go to the Pearson Access Guide, user guide on page 11. And that will tell you how to enroll and unenroll students. But you'll download an Excel spreadsheet, and then when you go into your Pearson Access Next to enroll and unenroll, once you've filled out the student information on the spreadsheet, there's a place where you upload that. It's under the menu that's all the way to the very far right with a question mark on it. I think it's called support, maybe. But it's all the way to the right. You click on that button and it will take you to a menu where you can submit that unenroll and enroll student form. So that needs to be done by Friday. If students move in before Friday, then you'll enroll them or unenroll. If it's after that, then you'll just you can add additional tests, but you can continue to enroll students until February 21st. Yes, and you can unenroll students till the 21st. However, if you have selected a January 29th delivery date and you unenroll students after that, you'll still receive materials for those students. You would just return those materials unused when you return all the rest of your testing materials. So just make sure they're kept in a secure place. Let's see. Verified enrollment. I'll have to go look on my email. Accommodations. Thank you. Accommodations and EL supports. Those are due by Friday as well. So if you haven't applied for those need to be done by Friday. And that goes through the TAA site. So those are the biggies. Yes, there's actually, so the question was, can we get information on how to do a mock administration? And if you look in the technical manual, there's actually a link to the mock administration manual. And it will actually step you through how to do the mock administration. There's also a YouTube video on how to complete the mock administration. So the question is, it doesn't tell you how to...
In order to do the mock administration, you have to have a login and password. And they said that you'll get an email with that information, but it doesn't tell you how to request that email. Just the same one? Okay.
So you use your Pearson Access Next email and password to do your mock administration. Does that answer your question? Okay, so my computer is occupied, but I can look it up. Hang on just a second. Okay, so Kristen Hillman located the user guide for the mock administration more quickly than I did. Thank you, Kristen. And she posted that in the chat. And there's, open up the mock administration manual and then just start on number one. Let me find it because it'll be easier for me to talk my way through when I'm looking at it. So this is on pull down menu number 3 on Utah's ACT website. Here's the mock administration guide. And then if you click on that, then it will pull you through all of the information. The training site is located, the address right here. Then here are the steps, starting on page 1, working through page 12. So following through this information, it will help you to be able to actually complete that mock administration. There is also a YouTube video that has a how-to on here. And let me find where the link is. found that on their website, actually. So if you're searching, if you search for, oh, there it is. It's on our website. I think I found it somewhere. It's down here. It's the 4th bullet. It's how to set up a mock administration video. And if you click on that, it will take you to a YouTube video that will step you through the steps for completing that mock administration. And then you can follow through that information as well. But basically, you're just starting at page 1 and then just working your way through page 12. It will refer you to look in the technical guide for how to set up your Proctor cache. Look in, so you're going to be flipping back and forth. But if you follow those steps 1 through 12, that will take you through that process of completing the mock administration. In a nutshell, what you're doing is you are using fake students, and you're going through to make sure that all of your test nav software, your internet connections, all of those things actually work, and that it can be proctored. So as you go through those steps, that will give you the information that you need to see, do we have a glitch anywhere? Is there something that's not working? So the links question was, which page are the links on? The links are on Utah's ACT website under pull-down menu 3. And which is the menu that says the ACT verification, ensure nothing was missed. And then it's under verify technical site readiness. And there's the mock administration guide is bullet 2. And how to set up a mock administration, the YouTube video is bullet point 4. And I would recommend actually watching the video first and then going through the technical manual, because the video, I think, is a good summary of what needs to be done, and it's somebody actually showing you what it looks like. And there was another question also. I'll repeat the list. Yes. So the list of things that need to be done by Friday, just to repeat, you have your Proctor caching that needs to be done, all of your online site readiness, and you've got the mock administration that needs to be done. You have your ACT accommodations, if you have students with disabilities who are applying for accommodations, EL supports, if you have students who are learning English, those all need to be done. And I'm missing one. Verify student enrollment, thank you. So you need to make sure when you go in, instead of managing your organization, you're going to look at students and you're going to make sure that the number is accurate. And if it's not, then go through and look at your list and enroll or unenroll students based on what you need. So those are the 6 items to complete by Friday. EL supports. Technical requirements for online. Okay. So we posted those 6 things in the chat. It was also sent out in the ACT communications email if you get those. And they're in the to-do list. And I think I put a purple heading on it. That is correct. So the question is, something only applies to online, and the answer to that is correct. So the online technical requirements, setting up your computers are only for online testing, and running a mock administration is only for online testing. Okay. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we found in to-dos. So I'm going to come over to some tables here and have you guys share some of the to-dos that you came up with, and maybe ones that aren't quite as obvious. So think of some of your more subtle to-dos that are still really important, and same with online. And then online in the chat, if you guys will post some of the things that you came up with that maybe people might have missed, or things that people need to consider that aren't the obvious ones. And then we're also going to hit the obvious ones too, but we want to discuss some of those ones that are a little bit less obvious. But first, let's start with obvious things. So looking at your table of contents, the headings really give you a good idea of what the obvious things are on here. So you've got within your introduction, some of the things that triggers to me is your test, like your room supervisors, your test coordinators, your proctors, they all need to be trained. So you'll notice in your table of contents, the first thing it's talking about, you've got confidentiality, you have the standardized procedures, all of those things. Those are items that need to be conveyed, and conveyed very accurately to anybody that will be handling or involved in testing at all. There are ethical things that need to be considered if you have people who have relatives that are testing. And we'll see if that comes up in our discussions, and if it doesn't, I will bring that one up. But looking at, how are we going to handle our tests when they're delivered? Where do they go? Where do we store them? Things like that. When you're looking at the next items, test facility requirements, you need to have rooms that have particular spacing requirements. Depending on if you're doing online testing or paper testing, those are different. So they still require students to be spaced apart from each other, and it needs to be 3 feet. There's like a 3 feet buffer around students, and they have table diagrams in your testing manuals that show you how you can actually set up if you're using tables or desks, and if there's a room that has a U-shaped configuration, and they show you what's not okay. So going through those things, looking at that is going to be important. Online testing, you can use dividers like Carol's, which you can't use in paper testing. And so going through that information and looking at how are you going to set up your rooms? That's one of the big ones. Testing staff, how are you going to staff your rooms? How are you going to staff your hallways? One of the things that works really well is to have a roving proctor, because the test is long, and chances are somebody who is a room supervisor may need to step out to use the restroom. And those testing students cannot be in there with test materials without a supervisor in the room. And so you need to have a way to accommodate that. How is that going to happen? Somebody may have an emergency, somebody may get sick, so you need to have some way to cover that contingency. Also, it's helpful to have hallway monitors to just keep crowd control under control. If you have other things going on, other grades, if there's a way to keep your testing in one part of a building and have the other classes and activities going on in another part of the building, that's a good way to have like a quieter area. But you need somebody, this is high school, you need somebody to help remind students who are not testing that they need to zip it, and they should not be coming into the areas where the testing is occurring. So looking at your staffing requirements, those are some things to consider. Do you need more than one person in a room? Is one room supervisor going to be sufficient, or do you need a room supervisor and proctors? And that will depend on how many students you have testing in that location. And those are outlined, those requirements are outlined in the test administration manual. And it will tell you from 1 to 15, 1 to 30, unless you're doing accommodated testing, and then it's 1 for every 10. But you can look through here and you can find that information. So those are big considerations. Test security we've already touched on, but you'll get boxes, especially if you're doing paper administration, that have the test booklets, the answer forms, and all of those things have to be secured at all times. And so you need a place where those things can be locked, and where access to those secured locations is carefully controlled, meaning you know exactly who has keys to get in there, and if they are going to be able to access them, do they have authorized permission to be in there where those testing materials are. So at all times, the testing materials need to be in a secure location. So they can't just be delivered and set into the office and then call it good. They have to be in a place that's locked. And just a little note on that, if there's a security breach, this is serious. It's serious business, and it actually risks invalidating all of the test scores and tests for any student at that school. So it's a big deal. So make sure that you have that accounted for very carefully. So looking at how you're going to organize your answer documents, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but you need some way to actually get them from the boxes that have been delivered to you in an organized fashion to the rooms where the testing is occurring. So how are you going to organize that? When is that going to occur? Completing your non-test portions. Even for online, I recommend doing that ahead of the test. Online has a window of 4 days before and 4 days after. However, getting high school students to do the online, the pre-test portion after the test is less successful than doing it before. Because students tend to think, well, I've already taken the test, you know, I'm done, why do I need to do this other part? So I recommend having that done before. And then for paper testing, you'll need to do that before the test. And so you'll have all of that information completed ahead of time. And we'll talk about some hints and things that other people have done to make that happen. So when so the question is, where do students access the non-test portion? And I believe Cindy is doing online testing. Cindy, is that correct? Okay. So if you are doing online testing, okay. I'll just answer for paper testing first and then online. For paper testing, when you get your shipping supplies, you'll have the test booklets in those supplies. And then you'll want to distribute those to students and have them fill out the pre-test portion. Typically, it's easiest to do that within a class that all students have. Sometimes all students have an advisory period, or sometimes they have another common class that you know all of your juniors will have. Sometimes schools that don't have advisory will do it during a math class or an English class, which is not ideal because it's instructional time. However, if that's the only class where you know you've got all of your juniors, then that's a good time to do that. For online testing, the pre-test portion has, let's see, 4 sections. And the 4 sections have about 50 questions. Let's see, the 4th one has 55 questions. It's about an hour or so to complete the whole thing. So about a class period. That one is not timed, so it's not like the other administrations. And you could, if you needed to, you can complete it in more than 1 day. But it's better to just do it at one sitting and be done. The question is, once you receive your materials, you can do that at any time, and the answer is yes. So once you receive your paper testing delivery, you can do that at any time. Online testing, you will also have selected a delivery date for your ACT materials. Once those show up, you'll have the information to be able to start setting up the classrooms. You'll start setting up online test classrooms on the 29th of January. And once that occurs, that will get you ready to be able to do the online testing. However, students will not be able to access that until 4 days before. And then they'll have a code that'll be similar to the code that they would use, like a test ticket for the online testing, but that test ticket will give them access to the pre-test. And then they'll have a different test ticket for the actual test. Oh. Sorry, Emily, do you know if there are any other online questions? And Cindy, let me know if that didn't answer your question. So another similar question. So students will be all over. So once your students, so 4 days before, you'll get the link to the online pre-test portion, and you'll be able to download the ticket information for that student to be able to complete that pre-test portion. And they'll be able to do that from wherever they are. But they just won't be able to do it until 4 days before. Another question? So question about will we get a notification? You'll be able to run a report in your management window. There's a tab called reports. And so you should be able to run a report from there. Let me remember. I don't remember on that one if they send it directly to the students or if they send it to the testing coordinator and then the testing coordinator sends it to the students. So I'll need to double check on that, but I'll put it in the the ACT communications memo. You write a note on that so that I remember. So I will double check on that and get that information to you. Okay, so those are big items in there. Looking at your test day, this is your test day schedule. So one of the big questions that comes up is, well, what do we do with the rest of our school? We have juniors taking a test that's going to take the majority of a school day. However, there's not a reduced school schedule for sophomores and seniors. So what do we do with the rest of our students? And this is something that is left to your LEA to plan. It's not something that the state mandates, except for the fact that students still have to have the 180 days. So things that other schools have done, sometimes they'll have a job shadowing day for sophomores or seniors. Sometimes they'll have a college visits day. In schools that are large enough where the staffing can be shifted, the sophomores and seniors still have class. Usually they'll have a later start than the testing students do. In schools that are smaller, where that's the teachers are being used to proctor and administer the assessments, that's where you see the things like job shadowing, college visits, college applications, so things that are still focused. Sometimes schools will do the PSAT on the same day as the ACT for sophomores. Sometimes schools have purchased a pre-ACT or the PSAT. Sometimes they'll do the ASVAB. So there are other assessments sometimes that people will do for sophomores on that same testing day. So it becomes just kind of a school-wide assessment day as well, or benchmark assessing.
I have the pretest. Misty Bliss says, I have the pretest schedule 2 weeks in advance, but do I have to do it 4 days prior?
The only time, so the pretest needs to be done 4 days ahead if you're online, but if you're paper, it can happen as soon as you have them in the little box that gets delivered to you. So that's one of the advantages for paper. You know, they kind of counterbalance. So. So a question on revised instructions. There's revised instructions that will instruct your students to skip questions, 2 questions, and I can't remember which numbers they are off the top of my head, 56 or 46 and 59 or something like that. And those will be emailed, and they'll be actually also posted on our state website. I got a draft copy of them this morning, and they're pretty simple. All it is it's an addition that just says students need to skip questions, whichever numbers they are, that ask about parental income and religious affiliation. And so those are the only additional instructions. But those will be emailed to everybody before the test, and they'll be posted on the website. And for students that are doing pre-testing online, that will also go with their online instructions as well. Okay. Within 4 days for online. So you have a window from 4 days before to 4 days after. So it doesn't have to be on that 4th day, but it needs to be no earlier than the 4th day and no later than the 4th day afterwards. But you could do it 3 days before or 2 days before business days. Yes. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to come pick on people a little bit and have you guys share things that you've thought of that have to do with test administration and your schedule, your to-do list. I'm going to just have you guys pass the microphone around the table and share it. Share something. Nope. Anything you can go.
I've got on the test day, make sure there's a way for kids who forget their ID to have an alternate way to identify who they are by picture, and so that it's easy to move them into their rooms.
I've also got on test day to do a briefing session with room supervisors and proctors just to kind of go over the schedule and calculator and cell phone policies. What do you do when kids do something they shouldn't during the test, that kind of thing.
This is leading up to the test day. It's a question that I had earlier from one of my principals. He was curious. He runs the alternative high school, and before the test starts, they could be referred from their home high school to the alternative high school. And so the question is, what do we do if the materials for that particular student is sent to the home high school when they are now attending the alternative high school? And I was told that that particular ACT test that has his identification on it will no longer be used. That'll be sent back, and they would the alternative high school would fill out, bubble in the new information on a blank. And so that was my question, but it sounds like that's okay.
We test in a large room, and I don't think there's clocks in that room. We test in the gym and bring in tables, and I don't think there's clocks on the walls, so I need to find those.
We need to decide as a school whether or not we're going to provide calculators or require the students to bring their own.
Okay, question online. So the approved ID, there's two ways to understand this. One is if you're doing national testing, not state contract testing, the only ID that there's a very specific list, which does not include staff recognition if you're doing national testing. However, for state contracted testing, the first item and preferred one that most schools use is student identification cards. So if your students have student ID cards and they're hard plastic, like you couldn't change names or things on them, then you can use those. Then other options are driver's licenses or driver's permits. And from there, the third option that a lot of schools use is staff recognition, especially if you're in a small school. And in the administration manual, it will tell you how to document if you do staff recognition for student ID. So if I'm in a small school or I know all of these kids that are on my list, then I can verify their identity. This only works, though, on state testing, not on national testing. So if students go to other places to do a national state test, then they have to have a driver's license or a form of ID that's on their student ID card or something. They can't use birth certificates. They can't use other forms of ID. So one thing that schools will sometimes, so that would go with staff recognition. So the question is, can we use like student ID off of Aspire? And so sometimes what schools will do is they'll have an administrator out in the hallway who has a smart device that can connect to Aspire or whatever the school's SIS system is. And that person, that administrator, can then say, verify this student, but then it counts still as staff recognition and it would still be initialed in the student ID form that you fill out that yes, the student was recognized by this person. So the question is, how do you verify ID for online testing? So within the testing room, you do it the exact same way. So same three things. Because those students, in order to complete online testing, they can do the pre-test wherever, but the actual test has to happen in the proctored location. So it will happen the same way. Okay, good questions. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with online. Sure. Question. No. So for calculators, the calculator policy is written out there, and it will tell you specifically which numbers students can't have. I don't believe they do. Yeah, it's not like Sage or other things where they have a built-in calculator. But I will double check, though. Yeah, because that may be one of the new things that they were adding in. Let me double check on that. And if it's not being added in this year, it's on the docket for coming up in the future. So let me check and make sure, though, that that wasn't this year as compared to next year. Okay, if you want to share.
So for us, just printing out the student authorization tickets and getting those, retrieving seal code.
Mostly logistics, so like working with our busing to determine busing schedule, and we've got about 1,200, probably about 1,300 kids who won't be testing at that time, and that's what we're working through right now is figure out what in the world we're going to do with them.
So since we're an online school and we don't have a building, we have to arrange venues, and that's a big, big one.
Okay, anybody online who has some things that they would like to share on their checklist? Okay, we'll continue, and if you post those on there, then we'll share them out. Except I got to go back to my presentation. Okay, notifying parents of testing. So this is an important one. Parents need to know what's going on and when. Okay, in your workbook, you guys have a long list of wisdom from the field. So this is in a Word document. And in the wisdom from the field, these are things that were submitted by people who have done test administration before. And what I want you to do now is look through that list and copy and paste things into the appropriate column if you want to include them in your checklist. So things that need to be done a month ahead of time, 1 to 2 weeks, 1 to 2 days, or day of. And so if you look at that list in your workbook, there's a couple of clip art pictures. And there's a really awesome, looks like a lemur that says, I'm going to need some ID. So that's where your list starts, actually on the page before. But look through those items and find things that need to go into your checklist. So this is from when I asked people to share, what do you wish you would have known? What do you wish that you would have considered the first time you administered the ACT? What has worked well? And these are some of the ideas that they've shared. So take a few minutes and go through and copy and paste those. This is the bottom of page 1, and it goes to page 2, and I think it goes on to page 3. Yep, so it's bottom of page 1, all of page 2, and about half of page 3 is where that list is, and that's in the Word document. That is the administration document, your workbook. Yep. In about 2 minutes, we're going to continue and talk about the items that are in your checklist, answer more questions, and refine your checklists a little bit. So just a couple more minutes to look through the wisdom from the field section. Okay, we're going to talk about our checklists. We're going to talk about them starting back at 1 month ahead of time. And then we're going to work our way across. So when you're looking at things that are 1 month before, some of the key items that you're going to need to plan that need to be on your checklist. One is your rooms. Another one is your trainings. When are you going to train your test proctors, your room supervisors, identifying who those people are going to be, setting up your schedules for testing day. So this goes back to the question of what time are we starting our tests? You need to start no later than 9 a.m. You can start any time before then. You just can't start after 9. So when are these things happening? What are the other grades in our school doing that day? Who needs to be where, when? So that stuff needs to be planned at the 1 month date just to make it work well. That's not a requirement of ACT. That's a recommendation from the field and from me. Is that you're going to want to have that stuff planned ahead of time. Also planning what do you need to communicate. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more in a minute. Making sure that you have people identified for your accommodated testing. The accommodated test procedures are going to be a little bit different than the standard administration procedures. So making sure that you have people identified as room supervisors for accommodated testing and that they'll know that that's what they're doing as compared to the standard administration. Also, when you're looking at how are we going to organize supplies, so this is moving into the 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, depending on what delivery date you selected for your materials. If you're doing paper testing, and the majority of the state is doing paper testing, when you get your bins or your boxes that are delivered to you, one of the most helpful things that I've seen is to organize material. And the reason I put this little green bin picture on here was this is, and you can get these at the dollar store, but one of the things that I've seen that worked well is somebody had all of their tests and answer booklets, and they were organized in little bins like that. Number 2, pencils already sharpened, rubber banded. The pictures for somebody, they had printed out ahead of time, testing, quiet, no cell phones, do not disturb. All of those things were in a bin and ready to be picked up by the room supervisors. And they had a tag on the front of the bin that had the room and the room supervisor's name. And so it was easy to be able to check them out. And so they organized everything they could ahead of time. So the do not disturb signs, the no cell phone signs, the pencils, all of those things, and put them in the bin. And then once they could add the answer booklets and the test, the secured test information, they counted those out and they added them into the baskets, and they were ready to check out on test day. But it made it very simple so that people could get their verified information. They could count to double check, make sure they had the right information, and then go back to their testing locations. And they could return the information the same way in that same basket. So it simplified the whole process. Also, they had an instruction list for room supervisor. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And it made it easy for room supervisors who, once you give them their testing administration manual, if they haven't seen it before, they're going to be flipping through it, thinking, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? I've seen 2 ways of doing that well. One is highlighting and bracketing within the testing administration manual for all the room supervisors. That works well if you're in a smaller school. In larger school settings, you can make the bulleted list. First, check page 4 or whatever page it starts on in your testing manual. Read paragraph 1. And then you can refer people to that testing manual. But that makes it so that there's no guessing and people aren't fumbling through the books. They aren't trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do next? I remember something from my training, but I don't really remember what it was. So making that as explicit as you can is going to be a critical aspect of success on testing day, and it will reduce headaches running from place to place. Also including, there's different reports that you need to have in that same basket that you'll get. There's seating charts, the ID verification, an irregularity report, which you hope not to have to use, but there's conditions where you'll need to use that. If you have any kind of security breach, if a student has a cell phone that they have turned off, but it's not really turned off and it vibrates during the test or goes off for any reason, that needs to go on an irregularity report. The student is dismissed from the test. Their test is not scored. And so it's a big deal. So helping students to understand that if they have smartwatches, if they have Fitbits, anything like that, they need to be turned off, not just put on airplane mode or silenced. And if any of those things activate while they're testing, they're done. Their test is not scored, and an irregularity report is sent in with that. And so having all of those supplies in that little basket ready to go, or you can do it in a, sometimes I've seen them in filing, little portable filing boxes, things like that. But you'll want to make sure that your testing supervisors, your room supervisors have all of those materials ready to go. 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time, critical things are communication, and we'll do a communication list in just a minute, but that's going to be your big time to make sure that your messages are being clearly understood for who is doing what and when. And then looking at any last questions that people have with proctoring. Does anything need to be changed? How is our room arrangement working? Are there pencil sharpeners, tables, desks? Do we have the clocks? Do we have stopwatches? So you need to have 2 ways to time your tests. So the clock is great, but it's not accurate necessarily, unless you have people who are watching it really, really closely. But if you're walking around proctoring, it's hard to do both. So having a stopwatch is a good way to have your second timing method. And the tests need to be timed exactly from section to section. In the testing administration manual, it tells you exactly how long each section needs to be. And so you, if you have people using stopwatches, they can just start the time when the time starts and stop. It will beep or it will, whatever it does at the end. Also, if you have a place as a whiteboard, you'll want to have people write the time that the test starts and the time that the test ends up on the whiteboard so that people can see, how much time they have. And then you'll give them a verbal warning of 5 minutes. So you've got 5 minutes left. Yes, online is still timed. Can we add more than one room supervisor? So you'll have one room supervisor and then you can have proctors. So you can have as many proctors as you want to have. Actually, so as long as your proctors are walking around, you obviously wouldn't want to crowd the room with proctors. And you don't need people in there who do not need to be there or shouldn't be seeing the test. But if you want to have 3 proctors in a room, great. If that's, especially if you maybe have a room where you're concerned about test security, then that's a good thing. So a question, though, to cover, going back to who can proctor and who can't proctor. This one becomes important if you have any people who have relatives that are taking the ACT on test day. If they are and this one actually happens to apply to me this year. I have a student who is a junior at a high school, and if I were teaching at his high school, I could not handle test materials. I could not proctor the test. I could not do anything except maybe monitor parking lot, or hallway. So nothing that has to do with test administration. As it is this year for, I'll go out and I'll do some site visits on test days. Rest assured, his high school, I won't be coming there because of that particular conflict of interest. I can't be where his test is being administered. So if you have parents of students or aunts or uncles of students who are testing within your school, they cannot proctor or handle test materials. They could go to a different school and help out somewhere else, but they can't do that within your school. Okay, questions? Each room supervisor, yes, you do need a room supervisor for each room. So each room will have, the room supervisor is in charge of filling out all of the verification, all of the seating charts, all of the documentation. That's the room supervisor's responsibility. And the second part of that question was, do they need, for online testing, do they need to be enrolled as a user? The test proctoring itself for online testing, like starting the test and stopping the test, it will be, yes, they will need to be. And if Cindy has additional questions on that, the best thing to do is look in the online testing manual, because online testing, within each testing location, they will start and stop the sections. And there's a section where they can take a break. And so the online testing rooms will need to be in charge of that. So kind of like with paper, except online. So another question? Comment? Okay, so a suggestion for another WebEx to be able to walk through all of the steps, and I'll see if we can, for online testing, I will see if we can set up a time to be able to do that. It will probably be near the end of January. So I'll see what we can do to set up something like that. Also, I recommend coming to the training on the 18th, which will be hosted by the ACT people, our state representatives, and they actually will go through administering the test step by step, which is part of the reason I'm not going through step by step, because they're going to do that. I wanted to hit the things that they aren't going to talk about, because they'll talk about all the technical parts of this is how you actually administer everything and get into the software and use the technical guides and the manuals. So, any other questions? Okay. Okay, so looking at your lists, you've got items that you have classified by 1 month ahead of time, 1 to 2 weeks, 1 to 2 days, and day of. In this list will be yours, obviously, to expand as you come up with things. One of the other helpful hints is to keep this list in a place where you can access it easily, cross things off, and add things as they come up, and then save it for next year so that you know what did I do last year, what worked well, what didn't work so well, and what would I do differently the next time. Okay, so now the next thing is to look at your list and add ownership. So hopefully, if it's you, your list will be really easy because you'll just put me, 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 me. However, there may be things that you can still have other people do, like sending out communications to parents or things like that. So looking at who are you going to have be in charge of different tasks. So you want to plan who is going to do what by when and how's that going to happen. So an example that I put on here was if I was going to be in charge of verifying student information and making student room assignment lists. One of the things you may want to do is do it alphabetically. That is the easiest way to assign students to a testing location. So if that was assigned to me in my school, or if I was assigning it to somebody named Rebecca, who wasn't me, I would put that Rebecca will do that, and I want that completed by the 19th of February. So with your room assignments, that's a good one. That's a 1 to 2 week ahead of time. You want to know where those students are going. You want them to know where they're going to mitigate any confusion on testing day. So take a few minutes. Anything you can assign to somebody else that you have the ability to ask them to do, I would do it because you're going to have a lot to do. many as you can fit in. So the question, how many students can take it under a single proctor? A single proctor? Sorry, or a single room supervisor, proctor. Right. Yeah. So in your testing manual, it's 1 for 30. You'll go through, yeah. And it will be on, let me see. So when you're planning your proctors, a good number is 1 for about every 15, depending on where you're testing, especially if it's in a gym. It may be a little bit loud because the floor tends to be loud. If you're doing accommodated testing, it's 1 for every 10. But you'll be able to find there is a table. Let's see, and I believe it's on page 9 in the paper administration book, but it should tell you how many people you want to have in there as proctors. More time for assigning things. Hopefully you are able to assign a few things to other people and not everything to yourself. Okay. So next thing in our, so we've gone through planning. We're planning our checklists. We're planning what needs to be done at what time and who is going to do what. The next thing we want to do is identify things we need to prepare. So these are things that you need to create. So the easiest way to do this is to color code your list. If there are things you need to purchase, you can highlight them green. If there are things that you need to just collect or track down, highlight them yellow. If you need to create it, so maybe it's a document like do not disturb, no cell phones, your testing room assignments, things like that. If you need to create those things, then you can highlight those in pink. And that's just a good way, or you can use whatever colors you want, actually. But that's just a good way at a glance to be able to say, okay, these are things I need to purchase. We need number 2 pencils. We need clocks. We need pencil sharpeners. Or we need little baskets to put things in. Also, you'll want to use blue scratch paper for students. So when you have students who are coming in, they can use scratch paper only if it is the scratch paper that you gave them, and it all has to be returned, counted, verified. And so ACT recommends using blue scratch paper, the light blue color, because it's easy to tell if that's the paper that you gave them. If you just have random white paper, then there's not a good way to tell, is that the white paper that you gave them at a quick glance, or, you know, did they happen to have some scratch paper that just showed up from somewhere? So you can purchase that in reams and then just count it out and add that to your basket when you distribute the paper. And the same goes with online testing and paper testing. Well, online, your scratch paper requirements might be a little bit different, actually. That would be nice if they did. So the question is, does ACT send approved scratch paper? And they haven't in the past. They can write in the test booklets. You just need to collect them back up, which you'll need to do anyway. However, any answers scored in test booklets, or if they don't put it on the answer sheet, there's different things that you need to do to decide whether or not those answers can be transferred. But in general, the rule is if they only answer, or if they answer here and there in the answer booklet, then those will not be scored. They need to be on the actual answer form. Okay, so maybe it's online testing. Okay, so online testing is the blue paper. And paper testing, they'll write in the booklets, the test booklets. On page 44. Okay. This is what happens when you read 4 different testing administration manuals. After a little while, it starts to, yeah, that's why I need it in paper, so I can actually look it up. Okay, any other questions online? Does anybody need more time to go through their list to classify between create, purchase, and collect or track down? Okay, let's continue. So this is the big one. So when I talked about the big things that need to happen, your planning is critical because that's going to inform everything. But the thing that makes this successful or not, so whether you're the alien guy with guessing on the switchboard, is communication. And so when you're looking at communication, this is your next little table in your workbook. You need to decide who do we need to communicate with and what messages do we need to communicate. So, and how will those things happen? So is this going to be by email? Are you going to send notes? Are you going to put posters? Are you going to put it on your school marquee? Are you going to put it on a school web page? You know, or all of the above? I'll give you a hint. All of the above. Because you want to communicate this information in as many ways as possible, because chances are people aren't going to check their email, or they're not going to read the little paper, or maybe they never drive by the school to see the marquee. So whatever it is that you're doing, you want to have multiple ways to communicate that message. So what I want you guys to do now is to talk and figure out who do we need to communicate with and what messages do we need to communicate? What are our priority messages? And in your workbook, there's another little table on page 4, I believe. Yep. So down at the bottom of page 4, well, actually, yours may have expanded now since you typed. But, and the idea is to figure out what do we need to communicate, who are we going to communicate that with, and how is it going to happen? So an example, what do we need to communicate? Testing day. When is your test? That's big. You'd be surprised how many people don't know. Even though you've maybe told them in staff meeting and you've told them, you know, it's posted on your school calendar. It goes out in your little email reminder letters. Make sure that you have something that specifically says ACT test day is whichever day you're administering it, and then this means, so what does that mean if it's ACT testing day? If you're communicating with parents, that's going to look different than if you're communicating that information with room supervisors, or if you're communicating that with front office staff, with maybe the lunch in your cafeteria. Are you doing an extended break? Are you not doing an extended break? So those messages need to be communicated. Think about what you need to communicate to students. So let's just start with the what messages you need to communicate. So far we've got testing day, a schedule. What other messages can you think of that you need to communicate? And I'm just going to take ideas. Calculators, school IDs. So there's a form in your testing administration manual that will tell you what kind of calculators are okay and what kind are not. And that was one of the hints, was to check those beforehand so that students know, unless your school is opting to provide calculators for all students. But you'll want to make sure that those are ready to go. Okay, other things. students need to bring their IDs. You got that one. What other things do you need to communicate? Cell phone policy, smartwatches, Fitbits, anything that could possibly, potentially connect to the internet, even if it doesn't. But if the potential is there, the easiest thing is to just tell students, don't bring it. Don't bring it into the room. Don't bring it to, put it in your locker. Don't bring it. Don't risk having any issues that arise. Okay, other things that you'll need to communicate. So you've got testing day, phones, you've got IDs, calculators. What about test preparation? What do you want students to know about test preparation? Any ideas? So resources, good.
We have an ACT test prep class, we have a test taking strategies class, and then we always send with our things, one of the best things your kids can do, get a good night's sleep, eat a good breakfast, come ready to test, just those kind of things that we, I think, take for granted, but sometimes students need that reminder.
Good. So letting students know, hey, this is how you can be prepared, and also this is what the test looks like. So that you have students who are not coming in and they don't know what's going on, what the sections are, what it's going to be covering. One of the things that we have talked about is preparing students for the ACT through core instruction. And there's a video that is on YouTube. It's linked to our assessment site now, Em? So you can get to that if you'd like. It's another training that we did that talks about how do you incorporate practice into your core instruction. So it's an embedded practice that you can do because that helps students. So question, can online students testing online see the online navigation? You can download the test nav, the navigation, and then they can practice going through it. They won't see the actual test, obviously, but you can do it that way. Okay, any other things that you can think of, messages that need to be communicated? How about trainings? So think about when are your trainings going to be, who's going to do them, who's communicating that information. If that's on your checklist as you are, how are you getting that message out? And who needs to be included in that? So any other messages, message ideas from online, things that need to be communicated. The other thing is no food and no drinks. So my beloved Dr. Pepperton would be outlawed. No water. They can bring it into the room and they can access it outside of the room on break, but they cannot have anything within the testing environment. So if they brought it in and maybe they brought their backpack and it's up against the wall where they can't touch it, they could look at it and wave from across the room, but they can't access it. Okay. So as you're going, this communication of messages is going to be important. Think about if your students are eating lunch or not eating lunch. That may affect your cafeteria people. If you have alternate busing schedules, you may need to talk with the bus garage. If you have any other things that are also going to affect your 10th and 12th grade students, or if you have 9th grade students in the same school, what do those messages need to be? How are those going to be communicated? So this list is going to become really important because if these things don't happen, that's when you get the breakdown. If these messages don't get relayed across to whoever the end person is, then that's when the breakdown happens. If your office staff needs to let you know when that testing shipment comes, and it's just been sitting by the front door because some boxes from FedEx were delivered, that's a problem. So you need to let them know, hey, when FedEx comes, I need to know right away because these need to be secured. So, those kinds of communications are going to be really important to make sure those things are ready to go. Question? they should be delivered to the, so the question was, do they come to the district office and then does the district office disseminate them? So, or do they come to the schools? They should come to the school locations where those testing coordinators are. Okay, any other questions, comments on communication? Anything from online on communication? Okay. So we want to solidify your plan. So as you've gone through your plan now, you have, it's not obviously everything that you'll ever need to know, but these are some of the highlights of things that aren't necessarily in your testing administration manual to think about. So you're going to need to go through and see now, okay, what are my priorities? What's the most critical thing that I need to make sure happens? Do that first, okay? Then you're going to want to know, what am I going to do next? So first, second, third. So at the bottom of your little workbook, this is your actual list. So the first part is kind of your brainstorm. Now you get to transpose things. So this is a copy and paste. And it will be near the end of your little workbook. And it's just what tasks do I need to complete first and second. And give yourself a deadline. By when? So it doesn't do any good to say, oh, here's some tasks. I'll get them done. I'll do that. Because what happens? I'll do that becomes, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, I've really got to do that. Yeah, I got to do that. But give yourself a deadline because it helps you to stay organized and it helps the people that you're relying on to stay organized as well. And it gives you something to follow up on. If you've asked the mysterious Rebecca to make sure that the test room assignments were done by February 19th, then by February 19th, you have something to follow up on. And that expectation is set. So you're going to want to assign dates. So your next job after you've done that is to anticipate barriers. So you've got this list, you prioritize it. What in the world could possibly cause a problem? Yeah, don't delve too far into that hole. But you want to identify what are your potential barriers and how are you going to address them.
Will we need to have all of the test administrators and proctors listed on this?
Okay, question. Will you need to have all the test administrators and proctors listed on Pearson Access Next? The proctors do not need to be on Pearson Access Next because they don't need, let me back up. Is this for online or paper? Misty, is this online or paper? Actually, proctors, no. Room supervisors, yes. And testing coordinators. But your testing coordinators are the people who will have access to that information. The rest of it you record on, there's a form, and you can actually, I think it should be linked from the manual, or it's at the very back of the manual, but you'll find the different forms that you need to fill out to identify who are all of the people that are involved. Also on proctors, one note that I didn't bring up that I highly recommend doing, it's not a required item, but when you do your test proctor training and your room supervisor training, you'll want a record of everybody that was trained, and I would recommend having a some sort of confidentiality agreement that the people at the training sign, and that can be the thing that verifies that yes, they attended this training, but you want to document that they understand that the materials need to be secure at all times, that students can't use cell phones, and that as room supervisors or proctors, they don't get to be standing on their cell phones and things like that. So you want to have that written verification in case there's a need for an inquiry into anything that may cause a test irregularity. Also to just verify and to make sure that they have agreed to not discuss test contents. They can't take pictures of tests, any of those things that could potentially risk the assessment for your schools you want to make sure that those people at the training verify and provide assurances that they understand those things. That's not a requirement in the testing administration manual, but it is a good practice. And if you need an example of something like that, let me know. You can email me, and I can share some with you that are well written from a national test point of view. So, okay. Do all proctors have to have the proctor cache? The room supervisors have to have the proctor cache. The proctors are just walking. They're making sure that the kids are doing what the kids are supposed to be doing. And so when it comes to the technical questions, the detailed questions, I'm actually going to recommend coming on the 18th or logging in on the 18th if you can't do it. It is 12:30 to 2:30. So it's right after AD meeting on the 18th. Because that's when they'll go over all of the detailed stuff. So the technical, how do I do this? How do I, what does this actually look like? So the ACT training actually covers all of this from start to finish. The 18th of this month, so in 10 days, a week from Thursday, right? Today's Wednesday. So a week from Thursday. And it will be here in Basement West. Okay, another question. So we do not have one that we've created as a state form. So the question is, if there is a confidentiality form that's out there, can it be posted to the state site? And we don't have an official confidentiality form. I do have some examples, though, of forms that I can email out and share with you. And once we get our UEN page where we're going to post resources, I'll add it on there. That probably won't be in the next month. I don't know. I have my hopes. But I can email it to you. And I'll just include that actually on the ACT communications. I'll just include it as an attachment on there so that if you'd like to see that, you've got it. But you're welcome to make your own for that. Or if you want to take the one that I send to you, you can copy that and use it for yours as well. But just know there's not an official state one that we have created, unless there's a request for that. And if you guys would like us to create that, I'm more than happy to do that. If that would make your job easier so you don't have to worry about that, I can take the verbiage and put it on one. It would just need to go through an approval process. But I'm happy to do that if that would be helpful. And if you'd like that, send me a note so I can then turn around and tell the people I need to tell, hey, this is a request from people in the field who would like to have this form. And then I'm happy to do that. Okay. So let's talk, actually, before we go to the very last bit, about barriers. So thinking of barriers you might come up with when you're addressing your checklist, what were some of the things that you guys came up with? What were some of the barriers you were worried about? Assigned seating. So good question was how do you, yes, the seating needs to be assigned and the tests will be handed out in the order they're assigned. It's really specific in the way that needs to happen. I've seen that done several different ways. One way is just masking tape, stick it on the desk or the table, write a last name on it. Another one is 3x5 cards. If you have shiny tables with a laminate surface, you can actually write it with dry erase marker and then wipe it off. So I've seen it done that way. Another way I've seen it happen is that the room supervisor maybe is at the back of the testing area and a proctor is maybe at the front, and as the room supervisor admits the student, the proctor places the student where they're going to be, and then they record it on the table seating chart. And so that way students aren't going to find it, they're just told, and then that's recorded then. So, but writing it on the desk with dry erase marker actually works pretty well if you have that option. Okay. The ACT, so question, is the ACT required for all juniors? The answer is yes, unless the student is a student who is a student with a significant disability and is taking the DLM or UA. In that case, they take those alternate assessments, but the rest of the students in the state are taking the ACT, and it is with writing. And writing is not optional, unless they opt out. Yes, they do have the right to opt out as well. Parental exclusion, yes. And there is the parental exclusion form that is on the state website, and it's got all of the tests that are offered for elementary grades and all of the tests that are offered for secondary grades. The ACT is on that, I think it's the third page or the second page, and it's down kind of near the bottom. So if parents, yeah, so it's front and second page. There you go. Yeah, so it's on that second page, and they just would mark the box ACT, and then the parents have to sign it. So. Question, what if a student is sick or absent? Within the administration manual, there's a decision tree, actually, that tells you, does the student test later, or did they just miss up their chance to test? For the most part, if a student is absent, they'll test later. So there's makeup test days for paper, and online testing has a window of test times that are available. If they got sick, and let's say they finished only section 1, and they haven't finished the rest of the test, there's a little decision tree that's in the manual, and it tells you whether or not that student can continue or not, and what you do with the answer key and all of those booklets. So on most of that technical stuff, the booklet will address what do you do. That's why it's 144 pages of really interesting reading. I read them all a couple of times, actually, which is part of the reason that they kind of cross in my brain sometimes. But it will step you through what those decisions need to look like. Also, if you have irregularities that happen and they've already completed one section, what do you do? And that will step you through that step as well. Any other questions? Okay. So this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Or this was a picture courtesy of my son, who I was thinking about. I'm like, well, I need something that goes with sailing, but doesn't really show a comfortable sailing day. And he's like, oh, have you seen the picture with the cat? So this is the picture with the cat. I don't know why on earth the cat was on this thing, or actually my guess is that it probably wasn't on here and somebody nicely photoshopped it in. Yes. Accidentally, yes. So to avoid this awesome situation, the things that we had talked about, we want to do planning, preparations, anything you need to prepare ahead of time, and that communication, that critical aspect of making sure that all of your planning and preparation doesn't go to waste because you didn't communicate it. You want to make sure you've identified your tasks, what needs to be done. And this is where on the 18th, if you come to that training or participate online, you'll want to add things to this list based on the technical items that they go over. And then have you made your plan? When are you going to do this? Who is going to do this? How are you going to know that's going to happen? So any last thoughts? This is like last wishes, or not really. It's not that bad. Mike, you look like you're wanting to say something. Yeah, so schools have been, we've been doing ACT testing since 2000 and, let me think, it's 2017, so 2009, I think was the first year we did it. And so the schools have been through this, except if you're a new school, then this will be your inaugural year. But schools have been doing this for a while. The protocols have changed over time, and they've actually changed from last year to this year, and they'll probably change from this year to next year, which is why it's important to check what's changed in the ACT and also to check the manuals, because any updates will be in this year's manual. So don't use last year's manual. Use the 2018 testing manual. Okay. So, question online. I saw it pop up just a second. So the question was, the deadline to manage students is the 12th. So yes, that's the deadline to manage that enrollment, because that will determine what gets shipped to you. However, if you have students that come in or leave after that, then you can still manage that up to the 21st of February. But they just, so what happens when ACT sends you materials is they'll send you what you've put in plus an overage amount. And then you use that overage to address those students. But you want their scores to be attributed to you and to your school. So that's why you enroll or unenroll them, even if the stuff's already been delivered. Okay, so this is our last thought about being ready to go. And I don't know if you guys have seen this one, but this is what happens when you work together in your plans. So with that thought, that's you guys with the organization all over the place, so that you are successful in achieving and beating your anteaters in testing. So with that, it is 3 minutes before 3. If you have remaining questions and you want to stay and ask, please feel free. If you have, I'm going to refer you to the ACT website is a wealth of information. So that's our state website. And if you step through from 1 to 7 and look at those menus, those are going to be the places where you'll find all of the resources that you need to look at, well, what's the technical manual for this, or how do I find this information? So that's a great resource. And then if you get stuck and you're like, oh, I need a little bit of additional information, I can't figure out how to add something, to move something, call the ACT help desk. That's what they're there for. That's what we pay for. So use them and email me. Sometimes it's harder for me to return phone calls because I'm not always in my little cubicle, but I can email from just about wherever I am. So please email me if you have additional questions. Just know that sometimes I will refer you back to these two things because they're going to be the best places to answer your questions, but I'm always willing to help, in whatever way that I can. And also, if you guys have suggestions, like the thing with, can we do the training for the online administration, please send those to me, because that's how I know how to help. And ultimately, that's my job, is to help you guys as you're putting this stuff together. So please let me know what would be useful as we go. So any last questions, ideas? Online. Okay, let's answer those two questions. So the first one is, if I have students who are testing at another location and they're an online school, if you'll want to coordinate with whatever school location those students are testing. So If they're testing at their neighborhood school location, if they're testing at a college, that'll be a national test date and not our state mandated testing. But let's say you're an online school and you have a student that resides in Cottonwood High School's boundaries. So they're going to test at Cottonwood High School. That student would need to be in Cottonwood High School's Pearson Access Next management, and you can work that by enrolling and unenrolling. And then on the, I believe it's box 8, that's where you put the school code so that the score comes to you. So, right, any students from Cottonwood High School would use their code. Any students testing at Cottonwood High School who are not Cottonwood students would use their school code. And then that's where it's important for you to communicate with the testing coordinator if you have students who are testing in another location that's not yours. If they are on, yes. Sometimes you have students who are dual enrolled in 2 brick and mortar settings. And so the ACT student data upload has a series of tiebreakers that it goes through, and it will default to where has the student been enrolled first. That's the first tiebreaker, and then it goes through a whole series of questions. But if, let's say, the student only was taking computer tech at this class and everything else is over here, and you'd want their scores to be attributed to their the majority of their core class school, then you would want to manage that through Pearson Access Next. So on box 8, yes. So question was if we have students in a district that are online and then, but they're testing at various neighborhood school locations, then they would be listed in Pearson Access Next for the school location where they're testing. But when they go to fill out the test information, the required test information, which is like name, birth date, address, I believe it's box 8 is where they put their school code. And they would put the code for their school. So in your case, it would be Blue Peak that would go on there. They are listed, let me think. You can access them to remember where they are listed. I will have to look it up and send it to you because I can't think of it off the top of my head. But they're in it. You should have access to all of those as the district testing coordinator for each of your school. But I have a master list, so if you can't find them, let me know, and I can get them to you. Or you can call up there, and they can actually tell you, hey, this is the code. So. Okay, question for the field.
If my online students go and test at your brick and mortar school, how annoying is that to you?
I was going to make a comment about that, honestly, because I was going to say, are we obligated to accept those other testers? And not that I have a problem, it just takes a lot of time and resources to call every kid and their parents, say, we need them here for this thing, we need them here for this, we need to, because they're not in our system. Sorry, can you hear me? So because they're not in our system, so I can't just, everybody else I email and do the phone call and it goes to everybody. And so it takes a lot of manpower to contact every single kid and parent and tell them what's expected, what calculator you can use. Don't bring that, and so are we obligated to accept them?
So this is going to be a very politically diplomatic response. The best thing to do is to work closely with the testing coordinator of the school that is sending those students to you and to work out with them how to do the communication. But all students need to be tested. Yeah, so I would work with the school testing coordinator from wherever they're coming from to make sure that that communication is happening. So that way you're not bearing the burden of doing all of it. Comment? The national ACT site is different than the state ACT site. So national ACT testing is actually totally separate from state ACT testing. It's not even the same branch of ACT. And so the only thing that gets shared between state and national testing is that if a student has accommodations. And that's it, which is actually why we don't have access to any of the accommodations information at the state. So, but the state contracts, all of our state stuff, that's why when you call the help desk, they'll send you to the state, or they should. If they don't, then you need to make sure you get the right extension, so it goes to state testing, because the protocols are a little bit different between state and national testing. So national testing, they can only test at the national site unless there are special testing arrangements that need to be made depending on student accommodations. But for state testing, it runs differently because we're doing it for 60,000 students across the state. Cindy, they may have put you through to the wrong place, and that will be a good question to ask on the 18th when the ACT people are here. But they can test in they can test in an alternate location. And actually, if you look in the administration manual under, I believe it's called alternate locations, you'll be able to find information on that. Or it may have even been in the last presentation from ACT. You write down a note for me. So I'll look and find that information and I'll send it to you. No, that's not true. Okay. Yes, I'll send her that. So students can test in alternate locations. Okay. Any last questions? Thank you for coming. And if you have other questions you want to say, you're welcome to. For people online, if you have additional questions, I will go through and I'll answer those online. But otherwise, have a very happy Wednesday. And then I hope to see you guys on Thursday. Thank you.